Diamonds are one out of the 6 main currencies in Pokeclicker, with it also being notorious for being pretty difficult and time consuming to obtain. Diamonds are unlike the other currencies however, it can't be farmed easily by idling, and when farmed actively is usually rewarded gradually and slowly, rather than in bursts like with quest points. So what are the ways you can actually farm this currency and what do you do with it? Diamond farming is by far the slowest to farm currency in the game, with only a handful of methods. Some more useless than others, but let's take a look at them. I'll be listing off these methods from worst to best, so let's start off. Did you forget rare item drops were a thing? I did. The occasional evolution item drop is neat, but a drop in the bucket due to the extremely low base odds of 1 in 512. While most of what you get from these drops are berries and rarely evolution items, you can occasionally get underground items, technically making this farmable for diamonds, but it's a stretch. The underground item drops are even more pitiful, with a staggering 1 in 2048 base odds. Yes, these odds can be increased with the dowsing machines, but the odds are still in the low thousands. Not only this, but a handful of Pokemon are actually even capable of dropping underground items in the first place. Your best bet is to look at the wiki for each Pokemon's rare held item, but it's really not worth it, with the best route for farming this way only netting you a measly 7 diamonds an hour on average, according to the wiki. But if you want to do it for whatever reason, Unova Route 21 is the highest diamonds per hour route in the game. So have at it, and good luck, because you're surely going to need it. This one just makes me sad. Dungeons used to be a viable way of farming diamonds. Time consuming, yes, but it did make you a respectable amount. However, this is no longer the case after dungeons had multiple loot pool table changes and nerfs. They still do drop underground items that can make you diamonds, but this is similar to route farming in that the odds are absolutely abysmal. The highest selling underground item, the heart scale, is found in many dungeons. However, its loot tier is mythic, meaning it starts with 1 in 1000 odds and gradually goes up with dungeon clears, up to a high of around 1% at 500 clears. All dungeon loot has its loot tiers depending on the dungeon, with decreasing rarity depending on clears, but this is just cruel. I also need to mention that you usually get 1 per drop and sometimes up to 3. The underground items aren't much better either, with the odd keystone and star piece being legendary tier, and the hardstone and max revive being mostly legendary and sometimes epic. The gist of it is, legendary drop chances range around 0.20% at the lowest, and go up to around 1% and sometimes nearly 2%. The epic chances are better, starting off with around 1% odds and going up to around 3 to 4%. There are just too many dungeons with different loot tables to list all of the different odds, but the dungeons and their respective drop tables are on the wiki, which I recommend you check out. The odds I gave are not the exact amount, but are a general range. Needless to say, these odds are pitiful, and unless you want to be farming hours trying to roll shiny odds to get more than a handful of diamonds, I don't really recommend this one. It's also worth noting that dungeon Pokemon do have a higher rare hold item drop chance than route Pokemon, so rather than the 1 in 2048 base odds with route farming, you get 1 in 512 base odds for an underground item. Taking it from horrible to bad, so let's just move on from this. So while finishing up editing, I remembered that I had forgotten to mention something called regional loot debuff. For those who don't know, regional loot debuff is when the player's highest region is more than 2 regions from the dungeon's location. The result of this is that the higher tier loot in the dungeon will have its drop chance severely nerfed. For example, if you are currently in Galar, any dungeon in Unova and below will have its higher tier loot drop chance nerfed. This chart from the wiki shows all the different regions and their different regional debuff region, so in general, don't bother farming a dungeon if its loot is affected by regional debuff. With the newly added luxury ball mechanic added in the 10.9 update, the luxury ball now rewards a random currency on catch, including diamonds. While this is cool, we only really care about the diamonds, but now we have to deal with a 1 in 6 chance to even get the diamonds. But how many diamonds do we actually get? Well, this screenshot shows the max amount you can get, so at a first glance you might think this is decent, right? Well, if you actually go out and catch Pokemon with this, you'll quickly find out this isn't the case. I'm not too sure exactly how the calculation for max currency gains works, but it has to do with the amount of base dungeon tokens you earn from the catch. But because I'm dumb and also not good at math, all you really need to know is this. Due to the dungeon token conversion, you gain a fraction of the max numbers listed. Using the luxury ball in the highest of routes with max base dungeon tokens will net you around 6 diamonds, which is a far cry from the potential 15 listed before. This, however, isn't the worst part, as this would be manageable if luxury balls were easy to come by, but they really aren't. You either get it in a dungeon where it resides in the loot table of a staggering 3 dungeons with an epic loot tier, or you play Farming Simulator and grow thousands of berries hoping that when a trade eventually comes through with the Berry Master, it will be with the berries you put all your time into. Luxury balls don't just require a handful of Gen 1 and 2 berries, they also require that and a few Gen 3 berries, making them the most time-consuming Pokeball to do farm trades for. If you didn't know, Gen 3 berries mainly consist of berries which take hours to grow, whereas the majority of Gen 1 to 2 berries only take a few minutes, so unless you are stupidly rich, luxury balls generally aren't worth the time nor effort. So let's move on. Much better than the other 3 options, underground mining does grant you a lot of items in quick succession, but the main problem with the underground is RNG. There are a large amount of underground items, and only a handful of them are actually sellable for diamonds. This was tolerable when it was only fossils, plates, and diamond items, but ever since shards were added, these are harder to come by, and shards take up a huge chunk of potential drops and function as output trades only, meaning they only appear in trades that make you give away underground items for shards. Shards cannot be traded for other underground items. And while yes, a lot of these items can be traded in the daily trades for diamonds, you have to get pretty lucky for a 1-3 or 2-3 heart scale trade, and for the input to be of an item you have a high amount of. Most of the time you will be trading for a profit of around 6 to 18 diamonds, or the lucky trade will have an input item you don't have much of. It does the job, and honestly is the bare minimum of what a diamond farm should be earning ya. If you look at just selling underground items, then a few hours will net you a few hundred diamonds, but throwing trades into the mix spices it up a bit. It won't make you rich overnight, but it's something. Underground mining in and of itself can't really keep up with diamond helper breeding either, but we will get into that later. Now on to the best farming method as of now. You may have heard this term floating around whenever you ask others what is the best diamond farm on places like the Pokeclicker Discord, but what does it actually mean? Daily chain involves looking at future daily trades and farming a bunch of an initial input item. The output of that trade will then go into another profitable trade, and then that output will go to another profit, and so on and so forth, which will eventually culminate into a high diamond trade, usually a 1 or 2 input for 3 heart scale output trade. For example, my initial investment is a 1 input, 2 output trade. I have 400 of the input item, so I get 800 at the end of that trade. The item I have 800 of later on appears in a 1-3 trade. After that I have 2400 of that item, so on and so forth, until the final trade where I dump all of it for a diamond item and sell it. Basically, you are doing multiple trades to increase your initial input into a large mass of items for one profitable diamond item trade. So how do you actually figure out future trades? The Pokeclicker Discord has a bot which has many commands, one of these being the /dailychain command, which you can use in the bot commands channel. By default, it shows the trades for the next 2 weeks, but you are going to want to bump that up a bit. I usually go for a month to 2 months, but this isn't mandatory. This is my current daily chain right now. You see, the problem with daily chains is while you can get crazy high numbers like 1,000+ diamonds per initial first trade, you have to get multiple trades that all correlate. This means that unless you get extremely lucky, you will have to do daily chains that go on for weeks or even months to maximize profits. And if you don't log on for one of the given dates or miss one trade, your diamond output will be severely nerfed. It is a long time sink but also a big reward, so unless you are willing to check back onto the game every now and then and on and off for the next few weeks or months, I would just recommend sticking to the underground farm. So now that we have covered the main diamond farming methods in the game, what can you actually use these diamonds for? Diamonds can be used to buy just one Pokemon in the entire game. For the low price of 15,000 diamonds, you can get your hands on the elusive Frisior Furfew. This isn't really unique as all the currencies possess a comically expensive Furfew in the Kalos region. Efficiency on the Mon isn't anything to write home about, and it's more of a novelty than anything. Underground upgrades are another thing you can spend your diamonds on. As the name implies, these make your underground better. Whether this be increasing your daily trades or the amount of items per layer, there are a plethora of upgrades to spend that make your underground more efficient. While most of these upgrades are worth it, I would rank them best to worst to spend as the following on screen. Before anybody brings it up, yes, you can spend diamonds on Master Balls, but just don't. They are not worth it at the max price. Beginning price, yeah sure, but it quickly gets out of hand. Just stick to dungeon tokens for Master Balls. Finally, the last and main usage alongside underground upgrades for diamonds is hatchery helpers. Aiden and Chris are among the top 3 best hatchery helpers in the game, with Noel being number 1. They are quite powerful and helpful hatchers, but they are balanced out by their price. Sure, hatching a few is no big deal, but when you need to hatch hundreds or thousands, it quickly becomes overwhelming, especially if you don't utilize daily chains. And farming these guys to get 25% efficiency for the achievement is costly, requiring 468,750 diamonds to get both of them to 25%. Overall, diamonds are either not very rewarding to farm, or when they are, require a huge time investment. Thankfully, diamonds are not really required at all and can be pretty much ignored if you don't bother with the before mentioned usages or don't care about 100% achievement completion. There honestly isn't much variety when it comes to farming diamonds. You either pick 3 extremely horrible options or pick the 2 viable albeit slow options. Diamonds, aside from the underground upgrades, are mostly reserved for late game diamond breeding. Anyways, I hope this guide was able to give at least a little insight into how to obtain diamonds, and make sure to keep an eye out for other potential guides or videos I make on Pokeclicker in the future.